This Three Beards Media podcast may contain mature themes, and if you're not down with that, we got 3 words for you. Like the podcast. Nailed it!
All right, everybody, welcome to episode 5, False Starts with Bill Blank and Chris Shipley, broadcasting live from our newly sponsored studio, Betfred Sportsbook. Bill, how are you doing today?
Swell. I like the new intro, the little pictures.
Yeah, I tried to find a crazed fan picture of me, but I just couldn't find one. So
and somehow there's a whole gallery for me.
All I had to do was Google crazed Iowa fan Bill Blank, and there was all kinds of Google images.
Somehow the register has found me every year at some point. Ever since I've had those seats, ever since I've sat front row, it's like, in fact, after a couple of years, I think a couple of people were like, okay, we've already had that guy.
Right.
We've already shot that guy.
You have had those seats for a while because I stalked your Facebook page for quite a while, and I was like, holy shit, there's a whole lot of these pictures of you and your son, and right down there at the bottom of the stairs.
Yeah, those seats are so baller, dude. I will never give those seats up.
No, I would take end zone seats for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing about end zone seats is it's hard to tell if they gain yards when they run the ball. Like if they just run off tackle, it's kind of hard. You kind of learn though, like as your seats. I mean, you've probably been to enough games, but like when you have seats in the same spot for an extended period of time, you start to learn how to watch the game a little bit differently.
Yeah,
like there's things you can look at that'll make you be able to tell if they gain some yards or not. But it's still tough.
Yeah,
but the higher up you are. Well, the other great thing is you see receivers pop open, which can also be really frustrating because the quarterback didn't see them, and you did.
Yeah,
especially this past year. But
it wasn't so much that he probably couldn't see him; he just couldn't actually hit him in stride. Not that I have a leg to stand on. We beat Iowa, and I think that completely broke our entire team.
Yeah, because you had to put it all out there. You had to lay it all on the line.
We blew our wad in the middle of September.
Yeah, that's what happens. You can just hear like that Revolutionary War horn going off in the background as they leave the stadium.
Right.
Just it's just like, it's over. They're done.
Oh,
they're done. There's too many wounded out on the battlefield. They can't get to the next one.
Right. It was bad. It was bad. I'd have gave up that win against Iowa if we would have had a decent season. So.
Yeah, I think you're in the minority there for some of your fan. I don't think you're in the minority for the fan base, but like I think the majority of the fan base will at least say like, well, at least we beat Iowa.
Yeah, that's not for me. I'll take a chance to win the Big 12 over beating Iowa every year. And honestly, Chris Williams has always said it, I think, the best. The way that you build that team to beat Iowa,
doesn't win in the Big 12.
Doesn't compete very well in the Big 12. So what do you want to do? You want to beat Iowa every year, or you want to compete for the Big 12? So
and also historically, that's what kept your job. Beating Iowa kept the job. You could suck. I mean, guys coached for 5-6 years because they beat Iowa.
Right.
Even though wasn't nothing.
Unless you were Paul Rhodes and you didn't do either.
Yeah, exactly. Right on. So how's the week been?
Been really good. Started my new job.
Yeah.
Things have been good. It's amazing what a little bit of self-confidence will do for you. I told my wife, I said, I'm not going to go into this job self-doubting myself already.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what I did at the old job, and I felt like I was constantly behind the 8 ball trying to prove myself. Whereas these people hired me for a reason because they know I know what I'm doing. And at this point, I'm going to make the decisions and do what I think is right. And then if I fail or fuck up, I can't blame anybody else. And I just as soon have it that way. So that's how I feel about it.
Good. That
Yeah.
doesn't bring about any extra anxiety or anything.
No, because at this point, I'm okay with having to rely on myself.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I've done that my entire life. So, and it's worked out all right for me.
And now we got Betfred Sports
right
on
now.
board
We
now.
got Betfred Sports on board now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and we're gonna get a little for our listeners. We'll get a little promo code for signups, and they'll get a special deal on a sign up with Betfreds. We should have those by next episode. So,
as soon as mental health podcast takes off, we'll get into my mom's gambling addiction when I was a teenager.
that'd be great. That'd be awesome. We can couple that into the fact
Listen,
that
here's your promo code and 1-800-BETS-OFF if you got a problem or you know anybody that does. That's all we got to say, right?
My buddies would refuse to play poker with my mom because my mom had no problems taking them for every dime they had every single time they sat down and played poker with my mom. That's a true story.
Awesome.
They stopped playing.
I love it.
But nobody called to nobody tuned in to listen to poker stories and me losing money. So
no,
I'll let you
get the show on the road, man.
That's right. I'll let you introduce our next guest.
Yes, our guest this week is a friend of mine. We go way back, all the way to high school. This is my buddy, Dr. Karuna Leary. Karuna, you can tell. I'm gonna just let you tell people kind of the background, the degree, what you're doing on a daily basis. We've just recently kind of reconnected via Facebook and everything. Because I couldn't find you. Not that I was looking. That would have been weird. But anyway, but come to find out, you're a psychologist. I had no idea, and just so happened that this is what we're doing, and that's how we connected. So tell us, kind of what exactly you're doing right now, and how you got there.
Yeah. Well, currently I'm living in Colorado, and I'm working remotely for the place I've been at the last 12 years, which is Marin City. It's a Black community just north of San Francisco. It's right across the Golden Gate Bridge.
Okay.
And my path there, I went to the University of Florida for college, so I got to go see some real football for a little bit.
Oh,
and,
you son of a bitch!
Nice.
In the 2 years that we actually went to the championship and won it the second year, so. That was nice, especially after growing up going to Iowa State games where
okay. Was that the team that had the multi-millionaire murderers on it? Was that team?
No, that was afterward. That was a little after my time, yeah. But so I was there, and then I went up to Atlanta for graduate school, and my focus was child and family, and I mostly worked with teens, especially males. Being a male therapist, there aren't a lot of us, so everybody gave me their teen males to work with.
Mm-hmm.
I worked some out in the countryside there in a locked facility where kids would graduate out to the outdoors and get to be in cabins. And that was kind of a mix of people from all over North Georgia. And then some of the other years I was in Atlanta, I worked in the inner city, Georgia, and some low-income Black communities, and mostly with teenagers. And then I ended up doing my internship out in Denver, Colorado, my pre-doctoral internship when I left Atlanta, and worked in a kind of a Black Hispanic mixed community near the Broncos Stadium. And I was there for 2 years. I did an internship, and then they hired me on. And then I made my way out to California and worked for Kaiser Permanente, which, I don't know how far east they've spread but in California, it's like an insurance company / hospital.
Okay.
It was a great place to do a residency. I learned a lot, but as far as, it was kind of more
corporate,
affluent white people in an area that were coming in, and it wasn't really a community I was working in. It was more of a bringing people in from all over the county. So I did that for a couple of years and got good experience there, including working on a suicide team there. So answering phones and working in crisis. And then I ended up in Marin City in 2011. It's a small community in a really rich it's a small Black community in a really rich white community. And so people have always had to leave this community and go get services, out in an area outside of their community. A lot of people don't have cars, so they're taking buses, even though it's only 3 exits up and would take you 10 minutes in a car. It's like an hour in a bus.
Right.
So this guy, Dr. Robinson, who grew up in that community, he's a medical doctor, and he started this medical clinic there so that people from the community could just come there instead of going out, into like Whitelandia and having to like be in, especially in Marin. It's one of the richest counties, I guess, in the country. So it's very like the diversity between these two places is like, it's so apparent. And about 3 or 4 years after they got the medical clinic started, they wanted dental and behavioral health. So I applied for the job, and the guy from the community, we got along, and the other people that did the interview with me really liked me. But they're like, okay, here's 2 things. We're hiring you, but A, you're a mental health specialist, which I'm sorry, but in my community, like, we don't really trust therapy. And I was like, point taken, I get it. And you're a white guy, so like, good luck. You'll either be here in 6 months or not. And that was 12 years ago. And the clinic's grown into, we've got multiple clinics now and multiple therapists and a community that's kind of changed its whole attitude toward mental health. So it's been just like a really amazing experience for me to be there the last 12 years. The last 2 I've been working remotely just for a lot of safety reasons, with COVID and the community I'm working in and the ventilation that we have in our buildings and stuff. So
right on. Wow. So I'm obviously not surprised. Just how much do you think graduating from North High impacted any of this?
That it impacted probably all of
right
where I've pursued and what I where I feel comfortable. I kind of laughed when Dr. Robinson said to me, "Good luck," because I got, I was like, "Oh yeah," and they were kind of like, "Cool."
All they see is a white dude.
Yeah, and from Iowa. What the heck,
Yeah.
And, it's funny. I told him, "You guys, I grew up. I feel really comfortable in in a community that's." I said, "I didn't come from even
a diverse community."
Yeah, but they're kind of like a white kid from Iowa, and black people, and I was like, "Yeah."
Uh-huh.
But yeah, for me, being able to take what I think are good skills and, something I'm good at and giving it, being involved in this community where, I've gotten to know like families and even worked in ways that you wouldn't normally as a therapist work with like someone's grandma and their mom and maybe their kid. But in this community, I do because they trust me, and that's where the most work's going to get done, and not doing things the way that kind of in a white focused community, the way therapy is done, where it's like, oh, well, you have people, you never would work with family members because it's all kind of overlap. But what I found is you kind of work kind of improvisational and really like show up for people, and then that's how they're going to feel supported, not like setting all these boundaries that are something I learned in school that aren't necessarily don't apply to that community
applicable.
Well.
Yeah
So
yeah, well, because to me, I think probably out of the gate for you, it was just a lack of fear that won everybody over. They could probably just tell you weren't scared.
Right.
And that's the number one thing. I had the same, I've had the same circumstances in comedy where, I ended up there for a lot of years. My niche was opening for famous black comics, and I'm the only white guy in the room.
Right.
And I remember people asking me before the show, like, "Oh, well, like, are you scared?" I'm like, "No, I'm not fucking scared." Like,
yeah.
And I was like, "Mark my words, if you're walking around this audience and I'm doing well, you're gonna hear people going, 'This dude don't give a fuck,' and it's a compliment. Trust me."
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because the other day I said that to someone. I said, this might sound weird, but I think, going into a place and not being fearful, we're like feeling creatures. That's one of the things about mental health. When we really like get into it, we feel things. And when somebody's, apprehensive or like, oh gosh, is this person, I'm not wearing a purse, but if I like clutch my purse as someone walks up, they're like, oh wow, this person's nervous or scared, where I'm like, I feel more comfortable here than, it's kind of like when I'd wander over to the west side of Des Moines and be like, oh God, like all these alley kids, like I don't necessarily
exactly. I don't connect with them. Like, it's not that I don't It's like it's not that I don't recognize the fact that I am also a white dude,
Right.
and that everybody else outside of here doesn't know anything about my upbringing at all.
Right.
They just see a white guy.
Right.
But the lack of fear is what shows to me. And again, I don't know how to explain it. You almost feel like you're tooting your own horn or something, but like a friend of ours, I'm not going to name him, but he lives in Kansas City, and he grew up, he went through North High with us and everything.
Yeah.
And he came to see me in Kansas City years and years ago. I was opening for Cheryl Underwood, and I was pretty much the only white dude there.
Yeah.
And he brought this girl with him, and, said that, she knew she knew I was white going into it. Yeah. And he told me after the show that he said to her, he was like, "No, you'll see." He was like, "It's a different kind of white boy that went to North High." That's just made me laugh for years. But I mean, there's truth to it. But like, I don't know. I think the overriding factor, what benefited us most, those of us that graduated from North, and what made us connected and in the diverse environment, was that none of us had money. Like every other Des Moines public school has some haves and have-nots.
Yeah.
Right.
But North High was nothing but have-nots.
Right.
Like it's not like everybody's walking around dirt poor. It's not like that. I mean, I never had to worry about my lights being shut off or anything like that.
Right.
But that also made me somewhat privileged.
Right.
In my community. Like to some people in my community, I was a rich kid. And all that meant was my parents' check to check was slightly better than their check to check.
Yeah.
Nobody had a fucking savings account.
Right.
Funny how diversity and being in a diverse environment makes you I won't say better people, but makes you aware of everybody's different circumstances and awareness.
Yeah, and it takes growing up too. I mean, I wouldn't have had this attitude while I was in high school. I didn't develop this until afterwards. Like my sister works with a lot of students. She actually works at North High right now. And she talks about the culture shock that the white kids get, which Karuna just kind of brought up going to West Des Moines. Like the white kids that are leaving North High and going to college, they're having culture shock at how many white people are there. Like a kid graduates from North and goes to Iowa or Iowa State, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's all white people." And they're wondering how to handle it. It's crazy. And it wasn't as we were always a very diverse school. It wasn't like it is now, though. It was still mostly white kids when we were there, but we were still the most diverse.
Yeah.
And so did that attract you to this? I mean, have you always been attracted to this route, the underprivileged route?
Yeah. I think for me, helping people that have the money to access therapy wasn't of interest to me, in a lot of ways. I mean, so there are kind of two things that happen with therapy. And I've found a lot more children and family therapists that are more focused on just really helping. Mm-hmm. And this doesn't, this is kind of an aside.
There's no one size fits all.
There's a lot of adult therapists that are almost more like voyeurs. Like they want to hear this crazy story or hear interesting things. Mm-hmm. And you guys were talking about on one of the other podcasts, like a therapist that's judgmental versus, really just there and trying to meet the person. And I like what you said about, shop around till you find somebody you trust and feel like you can be yourself with, and they're not like, that sounds like a terrible human to me, And so, a lot of the therapists that are doing child and family work, they just want to be there and helping the family have its own strength and ways of supporting its whole infrastructure, And so I feel like a lot of therapists that go that route, they're not interested in like all these dark stories necessarily. They're just interested in really helping families come together. And then adults, it's kind of mixed. You know, I've worked with a lot of big adult teams, and so I just felt like if I can work in places where they don't always get a psychologist, or they don't always get like people that are well trained, you know, a lot of times they'll get people that have like some type of degree, but it's more of like a counseling degree,
More like a social work. Like my therapist is just a social worker.
Yeah, and I've worked with great social workers, you know, like they're amazing social workers, you know. Sometimes you know, the clinics that are free clinics, or where it's, you know, it's Medicaid or Medi-Cal paying for it or whatever, they're just not getting good therapists, or they're getting people that aren't going to be able to relate, you know, and
they're getting the equivalent of the teacher that became a teacher for the 3 months off.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, like this is easy. I can sit here, listen to this, write some shit down, send them on their way.
Right. So, and then when I was in Kaiser, when I got a residency there, you know, it's kind of like one of the top residencies I could get. And it was amazing for the training. But then I'm like, cool. So I got that training. Now who am I helping or trying to work with here? And so I did that for a bit, and it was great. But then I decided this isn't what I want to do. You know,
I don't want to talk to
do like working with teenagers and families. And then what happened when I moved to Marin City and started working there, and I was the only therapist, it became just me working with everybody, you know, and
which was great for you, because then you get the diverse clientele.
Right.
Yeah,
and I get to see it all and start to create almost this understanding of this network, of this community, you know. So and so came in, and I'm like, oh wow, that's so and so's cousin I just spoke with earlier, you know. Where when I was in this other place, it's like random people, random family, random this or that, where, you know, it's just been a really, like, for me in my career and for kind of what I wanted from being a therapist, it's been such a nice growth and like symbiotic relationship of kind of like going through growth as a therapist, and even just like in connecting with this community and figuring out different ways to like support them, you know, especially as we've gotten more therapists with the team. And so
it's probably more rewarding that way too, because you actually kind of, people grow up with you, whereas you know, when you're when you get this training done at a privileged place, at a privileged community, and you know, you're basically working with a bunch of rich white bulimic girls for like, you know, at 6 months. There's no diversity there. I mean, I know I'm being tongue in cheek, obviously, but I've always I've always said eating disorders are just rich white girl diseases. Like, they're not real. And they just like, it's just a 16-year-old girl that is mad at her dad, so she stops at every drive-through and pukes in a fucking plastic container that she hides in her closet. But anyway, but honestly though, like, is there any truth? I mean, I that is somewhat like a real.
So I mean, that's like making really light of, in a lot of ways, a lot of things tend to afflict white culture more, especially if there's money there. But also, you can't, you know, that's one of the more like dangerous disorders. So it's like, to make light of it's a really heavy thing, you know. And it's easier to make fun of it because you see somebody coming from an affluent family and you're like, oh wow, it must be difficult to only be able to choose sushi 3 days a week and eat, you know.
Yeah, of course.
But you know, I've worked with that. When I was at Kaiser, they actually had me work as a male to help bring the dads in, instead of it just being like a female disorder. There, they were like, look, dads, you guys are a part of this too.
Right.
And really getting the family structure. So with that aspect of it, I really like the way, you know, we worked with that, because it does kind of put it back on the family. And but yeah, there are things that a lot of people, they have the time to like be depressed or reflect on their life enough to become suicidal, when other people, you know, if people were put in their shoes, they would have been suicidal years ago, you know. And a lot of people in this community I'm in are just pushing through, not even like thinking about what it is that they're actually putting themselves through. It's just kind of how it is, where a lot of the time we're like, oh yeah, my second home in Aspen, and then like the plane broke down, so we didn't get to go. And
my anxiety was through the roof.
So I'm in Marin, and it's this rich community, and they have ski week, and it's kind of crazy because the kids just get out of school. It's separate from spring break, and all these parents in this community that I work in are like, what the hell are we supposed to do for a week with our kids? Like, we don't have childcare. I have to work. Now you guys gave them another week off from school separate from spring break because it's ski week.
Yeah.
So you have these parents that take off with their kids for the week, and then the community that I'm in, where they started doing like free childcare during that week so that parents aren't screwed, and so it's like such a different mentality. But yeah, the way I've realized that like Cindy breaking her nail and like not looking good for her Instagram page can be as devastating to her, just as a bad place as, somebody that's like really going through it. And what we would say is like going through it, so.
No, that 100% makes sense. And I love that you said that, like, cause I've done that, most of my adult life where I'm like, oh, it's a rich kid, rich, whatever, fuck that guy, all that. Yeah. And I'm super guilty of that. And I remember someone saying to me, I think it was a quote from 16 Candles. Yeah. It was a political thing I was talking about, and somebody said to me, well, they're like, hating them because they have money is just as bad as them hating us because we don't, isn't it? Isn't it the same thing? And I was like, oh shit. Oh yeah. Oh, you got a point. Like,
well, I think it goes to what we talked about a couple weeks ago in that episode, Karuna, that you listened to, as far as the myths of mental health. And sometimes you look at people and you think they have this great, wonderful life.
How dare you be depressed?
Right. How you wouldn't, what do they have to be depressed about? I always think of, Bill, you mentioned 16 Candles. I always remember the bout that Terrell Owens had. Remember, he had a time where he was depressed and had some suicidal thoughts, is what they had said. And his publicist had come out and said he has 16 million reasons not to be depressed, was the statement that she had made. And everybody had just came down on her, like, you can't, just because you have money and you have, a star athlete and whatever else does not mean that you're immune to not suffering from mental health.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're, when your kid's a teenager and they're going through a relationship, like a breakup or something, and you as an adult are just kind of like, whatever, but it's so devastating for them in that moment.
Listen,
that's like something that we all need to really keep in mind, is isolate the thing. I mean, I was just talking to my son about this stuff last night. I was like, the rest of the world was looking at Robin Williams like, what's that guy depressed about?
Right.
Like everybody, everybody has certain expectations of what your life is for whatever reason.
I had a conversation with Caitlin yesterday. Was it yesterday or maybe it was Saturday? She's had kind of a rough week at work, and she's had some things happen at the apartment, and she's just had a lot of stuff that she had to deal with. And she called me and she, I'm struggling. I'm having some anxiety and so on. And me coming from an older generation, at first I was like, come on, it's not that big a deal or whatever. But then I remembered quite a bit of what we had talked about and what we had been working about, and what Lindsay Fennelly had said on the podcast, that sometimes my job isn't necessarily to solve her problem, right? Like I could have said, okay, well, you need to do this and you need to do this and you need to do this. But instead just realizing that she's calling me because she needs somebody to just talk to and vent to, and let her know that it's okay, that she's not okay.
Yeah. That's a hard one, especially for guys,
Yeah. Yeah. Because there was a couple times.
Which way do I go?
Yeah. Because she had said, Dad, I didn't call you to have you fix it for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're like, what are we talking about then?
Then why are we talking? What,
Right.
I thought, yeah. Well, because we tend to be solution based, and maybe that's an inherently male quality, in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's a struggle. Sometimes you have to say, okay, do you want my advice or do you just want to vent to me right now? Like, I think it's okay to just come out and say that, right?
Yeah, I think so. Denny wants to know if you've heard of the Second Wind Fund in Denver, Colorado, and do you think teen suicide is big?
Of the Second Wind, what is
Fund.
it? I don't know that. Yeah, I think teen suicide. I've worked with teens a lot. I've worked on a teen suicide team, and then just call-in crisis team for Kaiser. And I think there's just a lot coming in all the time. It's overwhelming, especially nowadays. When we were younger, you had to go to the library and look up an encyclopedia to know about anything. And so I think there's good things that come with it. Like there are a lot of kids are more open-minded in a lot of ways about a lot of things, but it's also really confusing, overwhelming. There's so much more, expression of communication, but also expression of depression and darkness, and like being able to, before, I think if somebody was down and all of a sudden a kid committed suicide, then it would bring up alarms for parents, teachers, kids. But now you have kids that can talk about it, kind of emulate it. There are some kids that talk about it and can help each other out of it. There are other ones that kind of pull each other into, the emotionality of being a teenager and, all that comes with that. Going back to what you were talking about, eating disorders, it's sometimes, or like Terrell Owens, these people that have all this stuff and you never know, a lot of times eating disorders come from, abuse. It can also just come from like this pressure of having to be, a lot of times it's like perfect students that they're like,
it's body dysmorphia in a lot of ways.
Like next kid, and so, yeah, there's a lot of pressures. And I remember working with this teenager that's like, I have a 4.789, but I'm not going to be able to get into Stanford because like Timmy's got a 4.81. And I'm like, what the hell are these? Like, how are these numbers even things you can get GPA wise? Like, shit. I was happy I was trying to like keep in the threes and shit, but like,
right.
And so to have a kid where I'm like, gosh, this kid's like doing 10 things after school, including, like where I thought I did a lot of stuff. I'm like, how does this kid have all this time? And then it's like one slip up and they don't get into this school they've been trying to get into for 4 years. So it's
then their life's just like over.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you do
God.
to your parents, and what you have as your trajectory is like going into your Stanford, and then you don't. You're like, cool, I guess community college for me, in another country.
Yeah, it goes from Stanford to community college.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what's crazy. Like, I don't think we talk to kids enough about just how an inherent work ethic gets you further than any piece of paper, any degree from anywhere. Like, I mean, you think, if you measure success by money, do you think there aren't multimillionaires that graduated from Buena Vista in Storm Lake, Iowa, or
right.
Graduated from Bethune-Cookman, or you think those don't exist? I mean, it's just it's an inherent work ethic. Stanford doesn't mean successful. That doesn't just that's not sitting on Johnny Carson's couch.
Right.
Like, you actually have to work. And of course they have a great work ethic. They wouldn't have achieved the, grade point average involved. But I don't know. I think we lean too hard on that sometimes. I mean, there's a reason that IQ tests are mostly fitting shapes into spaces, not memorizing things.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I just, I talk a lot on this podcast about, like, I'm all about doing drugs. Like, I'm all about trying everything. And my therapist, like I talked about my therapist earlier, my therapist is like, she's on the God Squad. I love going to her because she's on the God Squad. So
Yeah.
like she always like comes at me with how I need bigger. I have to have bigger. And I mean, she's right. Like there's something to that, especially when it comes to comics. That's a whole nother thing. But like,
Yeah.
and I always put things in terms of the universe, and she's like, she doesn't want to say God, and I'm like, it's all the same. Like, I get it. You don't have to like word police yourself.
Right.
It's fine. I still say God bless you, like when I think something's awesome, you know, like. But I just blow her mind all the time because I'm like, yeah, me and my friends, you know, we went and did shrooms this weekend and had like I was really depressed, and we all got together and we ate some shrooms. And yeah, it almost seems like I'm too old for that shit, but I think it's the perfect fucking time. But like, I'm sitting there, I had the time of my life, and I felt great after that. It brought me right out of everything. And I mean, I'm just an advocate for throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. I don't obviously think people should shoot up heroin or do meth, or, you know, I've never done any of those things, but I do think psychedelics, especially like shrooms being mellow, I wouldn't tell somebody to do acid if they were depressed, but I think shrooms might be pretty good. Like, where do you stand on that issue? What, you know, you don't prescribe medication, so
no,
you know, you've got just opinions. They're not based on anything scientific, I'm assuming.
Which actually, one of the things about not prescribing medications that I realized is nice in the long run is I don't have people coming in and like bullshitting me with some story and then being like, so can I get some Xanax?
Yeah.
Psychiatrist. So you can bullshit me or not. Like, I don't really care. I can only help you as much as you don't, you know, but, psychedelics, you know, it's funny because when I was younger, I had a professor that I really looked up to, but he was a group professor, and he's telling me like, in the 70s, like we'd do ever like scream therapy and like laugh therapy. We did a bunch of acid. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe he just said that. Like, I'm not telling people that I ever ate acid, you know?
Yeah.
And then as I got into my career and realized I'm good at what I do and I like what I do and what's helped me kind of connect and understand people, I had this CEO that I'm still friends with. We're very different. You know, she's this older Black woman that has never smoked weed, doesn't, you know, do drugs at all. And she's like, how are you like you are? And I said, well, you know, this, or your up. And I was like, and honestly, like LSD, you know, I was like mushrooms too, but psychedelics. And so, you know, I agree with you that drugs can be a great thing. And I think that it can help a lot of people. In my profession, I don't ever push that to people.
Of course not. You can't recommend it.
But when I have people that come in and they're kind of pondering, you know, like, oh, I wonder about this, or you were talking about ayahuasca last time. And so if somebody's coming in, I'll kind of put that wall out there to reflect back to them things, you know, why, and maybe what they could get from it. And I think it's more important that people just understand who they are and the things that help them, you know, like let go or just change their perspective on something. Like if someone wants to come home and listen to like some kind of music that's like head banging and just get all the shit out, or someone else wants to come home and listen to something really chill, it's like find your groove, you know. And like you said, everything in moderation and like what balances you out.
Exactly.
You know, and not, you know, nothing that we do, if it's obsessive, even, you know, running, you know, if you're like, oh, I run and it becomes obsessive where you're injured and you're running.
Yeah, you're having knee surgeries and,
you know, at some point, you know, these things can be like too much. But I really think, and especially when you look at the pharmaceutical companies that have all these really, you know, like I saw the opiate epidemic happening and was like, why is this happening? You know, why are they just taking this drug away and not telling people that it's like really
Did you watch that Michael Keaton show on Hulu? I can't remember the name of it.
That came out like a couple years ago.
It was fantastic. Anyway,
totally. So, you know, to me, when I see people that are, you know, able to smoke weed and not have to be on Xanax or Valium, that's a lot easier path, you know. Now, are there other ways to help people not have to do anything? You know, sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think the thing about psychedelics is it helps us see things different. And I think anything that can do that, whether that's witnessing other people going through something, reading a book, you know, psychedelics just have a way to do that very quickly and kind of potently.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to see a different perspective is one of the key things to us having like a healthy mental health, you know, being able to like switch our wording around what's happening, our experience of what's happening, you know. And I think that that's a way, even if it's just one time that somebody does it, to realize it's almost like if you were looking at life the whole way this way and someone tapped you on the shoulder and you're like, did you know there's stuff back here? And you turn around and you're like, holy shit. You know, like what was going on over here? Even knowing that there were like things going on back here that you didn't even like fathom, it kind of takes you out of you being the center of everything, you know. And so so
I think that's a great line right there. It takes you out of you being the center of everything.
Yeah.
And when you're like, I mean, ayahuasca, the thought of ayahuasca, from what I've talked to, you know, I've talked to other people that have done it, and I'm still probably a little too scared. I might get myself to the point where I'm not, but from what I've been told, like it's like 5 years of therapy in one night. Like as far as focusing inward and really being honest with yourself, and like, I mean,
you should be scared. It's kind of it's really like, how do you just go into all the things? And it's not even necessarily like a certain thing where you're like, oh, that's I'm in 5th grade. It's just almost like layers of anxiety or fear that have been layered on us over time, you know.
And what I'm afraid of digging something up. Like more than anything, like I'm afraid of digging something up that I haven't, because I feel that I've dealt with most things.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid there's something under there. Yeah. Because I'm still
some fear of the unknown.
Yeah, and just the mental, you know, the whole mind fuck of trying to improve your mental health all the time, but also understanding that you don't get cured from having an anxiety issue. Like, there's no cure for it. You just get better at handling it. You experience it less often. You know, there's tools, there's drugs, but you know, I don't care how many drugs you're on, you know, for anxiety or whatever. It doesn't mean that you're not going to ever have a panic attack. You still might have one, even though you're on that medication, you know, but you're not going to feel it daily all the time,
right?
Necessarily. So my worry is there's the layers, because I've never actually been cured of whatever anxiety issues. Like, what am I going to find under there that I haven't already found? And how all the shit I've dealt with, how bad is that going to be?
So can I ask you, what is it that you think, what are you fearful of that would happen if all of a sudden you look and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, this crazy thing happened to me when I was 6 that I forgot about?
What am I afraid is going to happen, or what am I afraid of?
So what if you look down and you're like, shit, I didn't even know about this. Why did I even uncover this? Like, what's the fear that would happen once you did that? So you're like in an ayahuasca ceremony.
Like it making me just almost like agoraphobic, like it turning me into just this person that lays in the fetal position and won't go anywhere, and just, you know, I'll just turn into that.
They're like, well, there's Bill in the corner again crying to him,
and that's all he's ever gonna be. That's
well, you know. You know what? So I told my friend this one time, and they were like, anyway. So I went down to Guatemala, and I had an opportunity to do some ayahuasca ceremonies, and I had done it once before. And the biggest thing was like throwing up, which I only did a little bit. So what they call it getting well, like part of it, you purge, and it's like it's not like from being drunk or like drink like poisoned.
You're
It's
getting
like,
rid of the demons.
you're getting rid of, yeah, totally. So I get down there, it's Guatemala. I eat something, and the ceremony isn't for a couple of days. And this guy's telling me how his life changed from it. He was an alcoholic, and then he like did ayahuasca with this shaman the first time, and how he's like puking and shitting himself. And I was like, "Whoa, what?
This isn't fun."
He's like, yeah, it's part of the purge, and I'm like, "Holy shit!" Because my stomach's kind of upset. So all I'm thinking about before the ceremony is like, oh my God, I'm going to shit myself. Like, I don't even know if I want to do this now. Like before, I'm trying to think about puking into a bucket and not missing, so it's not all over me. And I'm like, what do I do if I have to shit? I was like, oh man, this is like scary now. Anyway, in the middle of it, I was like, wow, this is like taking away all this stuff where you're like, oh, am I an okay person? Am I good enough? Do people like me? Where I was like, I don't even actually, like, if I shit on myself right now, like, who cares? Like, I'll handle it. Like, whatever, we'll figure it out.
This is the place to shit
He's
yourself.
like, wait, so you take ayahuasca, so you like don't care if you shit yourself? And I was like, that's what you got from the story? I'm like, well, yeah, kind of, because in a way, I mean, it's because if you think about it, like one of the scarier things you could do is like be in a group of people and be like, oh, sorry, I
shit
just
yourself.
Yeah.
But to be in a state where you're like, I mean, I'm just human. Like, who cares? Like, oh,
Everybody shits themselves sometimes. All right.
There was something so like humbling and like it just kind of makes you feel like, oh yeah, I don't have to judge and have all these things on me. Like if I mess up or say one wrong thing, all these people are going to be like, throw that guy out of the village. Instead it's like, if I can have compassion for people, like if that happened to somebody, I'd be like, oh gosh, let me help you, like from afar, because I don't want to get too close. But like,
right.
I wouldn't be like, what the hell is wrong with you? I'd hopefully want to help them.
Yeah, be like, oh man, we've all shit ourselves.
I was so scared about this, and now I'm like, I mean, I still don't want that to happen. But all these things that can make us feel like we're messed up or like something's wrong with me, a lot of the time is just caused from
ego,
our fear of how everyone's going to think of us.
That's that whole judgment thing that we've talked about before.
Yeah.
So it
kind of strips you of your ego.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, who fucking cares? People shit. Like sometimes they might have shit on themselves. Like, I'm not going to make my life be like, it's over because that happened. And you're like, wow, because 2 hours ago, I was like, I'm not even going to sit in this ayahuasca ceremony in case this happens,
Right.
Yeah. And just to report it didn't. So like, that's also nice. But like,
we have some good questions and comments that we need to get to, but we're gonna take a break real quick.
Okay.
Get a message from Revelton Distilling Company, Rob and Christy Taylor down at Revelton Distilling. They're launching their rye whiskey on Saturday. They're gonna have a big ceremony down there at the distillery, and you can buy 2 bottles, and that starts on Saturday the 15th. So let's listen to a quick word from them, and let's get back and we'll take some of these comments.
Sweet.
At Revelton Distilling Company, everyone has become a part of the Revelton family. From the Taylors and their daughter who helped perfect their award-winning gins, to the team who installed Lucy, our 33-foot-tall custom-made still, right down to the local farms that provide our coveted corn, and even the cows on those farms who consume our mash byproduct. Want to see the farm to flask come to life? Now you can tour Lucy and find out where we take Iowa's harvest and transform it into our finest spirits. Choose between a 45-minute tour or find out even more by scheduling a VIP behind-the-scenes tour to get the taste of the full Revelton experience. You can visit them at 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa, or find all of Revelton's award-winning spirits at any local grocery or spirits retailer.
All right, and we're back. We did get a flurry of comments during that segment. George Trice, who's a co-host on Side of the Storm, had come up and said that they were testing shrooms in Arizona, especially for vets down there.
Nice.
And then he also pointed out that the drugs from the earth seem to have benefits and have not been tapped. Cancer patients use strains of weed for nausea all the time. I was thinking that too, that a lot of those natural drugs and things like that are really beneficial for sure.
Another one that I've actually worked with some people, Kaiser started doing studies with it in California. And then I actually had patients that I was working with where they would do ketamine therapy with them.
I know some people that are actually doing ketamine right now, therapy.
It's a really powerful, and one of the things, because a lot of people like the natural, like mushrooms are from, and ayahuasca, they're from the earth, but some of these other things, it takes away that fear. So I've worked with some teens that they were even using ketamine therapy with, because they had gone through like some type of abuse that was kind of too much to handle in therapy, and then even after going through like 1 or 2 ketamine treatments, we're just able to completely talk about what they'd gone through. And then someone mentioned vets in Arizona. The other thing I was going to say, as far as trauma and anxiety, a thing that people should check out, and it's like a huge thing that maybe is for another podcast, but is EMDR. It's something I've been doing for about 7 or 8 years, but it works on the nervous system to help get, like you were talking about panic attacks and how you can never get rid of anxiety, but a lot of our triggers to certain things are tied, because they're kind of tied in time, where like if something happens at 5 years old and then 25 that triggers that, it can feel exactly like there was no time between.
Yeah. You lose all your memory.
Really, like, cut those triggers so that your nervous system's still going to like run from a fucking bear, but it's not going to run from the chihuahua because you got attacked when you were 5,
Right.
So just throwing that out there too, is just for some people that are listening, that have high levels of anxiety or lots of trauma, EMDR is really powerful. So
say that again. EMDR.
EMDR, it's eye movement desensitization reprogramming is what it stands for. And initially they were using it with war vets, but they realized, anxiety and trauma is really, it doesn't have to be these giant things, it can be neglect. It can be like small incidents that happened as a kid. I joked with somebody about like getting trapped in the bathroom when I was 6 or 7, like where the door was locked for 10 seconds. And I started screaming and crying like I was going to die in this bathroom because no one was going to find me. So this isn't necessarily like anything that I had to work through as a trauma, but you never know. For a kid, you get an adult coming in and you say, hey, have you been through any trauma? And they're not going to be like, oh, I locked myself in a bathroom for 10 seconds when I was 8, but these are things that can make people feel like claustrophobic, or things that really make us hesitant in situations. And
that leads perfectly into this comment and question from Spencer. What are the indicators that anxiety is becoming a disorder?
So, I mean, Bill threw out agoraphobia there. That's like the extreme end of anxiety. So anxiety a lot of the time will start because of a certain event or certain stress that you're thinking about. But then what can happen is, because there's so much stress or anxiety in your life, it starts to be kind of free floating, and you start to have maybe like low grade anxiety attacks or full on panic attacks. And eventually they start being triggered by themselves. So it doesn't matter, you start thinking about like, shit, I hope I don't have a panic attack. And then any little thing that happens makes your mind say, oh God, here it goes. And then you're off to the races, And so anytime your mind starts being focused so much on the anxiety that it's interfering with you doing things, where it's interfering with you being able to like send emails or call somebody or show up for places. And I'm not talking about like procrastination. Sometimes you're like, oh, I don't want to deal with this thing, but where you're actually, if your focus is starting to be more on what's going on internally and not in a like meditative mindfulness way, but like, oh shit, I hope I don't lose it way. That's when it's starting to get out of control. That's when you want to start figuring out ways to calm it down, because the best thing you can do is reinforce to the mind that you have ways to calm things down, And so the more that you can kind of find strategies to chill things out, instead of them just always getting to a place where it goes out of control, the more you can start to reverse some of that experience,
Yeah, I'm now maybe I just thought of this, and this is either brilliant or so fucking stupid you're gonna want to punch me.
Yes.
I feel like anxiety is like the AIDS of mental illness, like where like
I can't wait to like go down this rabbit hole.
I'm telling you, we have one of these every episode where there's I either want to I either want to punch him or
it starts off as HIV, but it can go into full blown AIDS or like what? Explain
I mean, kind of, yeah. Like it's like so because it's your own body. Okay, so maybe AIDS is bad. Maybe it's the mental equivalent of lupus. Like your brain is attacking itself.
Yeah, I mean,
instead
that's
of
really
like your immune system is attacking its own immune system, your own body.
Yeah,
right. That's what those diseases are doing. To me, that's what anxiety is, and depression, and I feel like they do kind of go hand in hand sometimes.
They do a lot of the time.
Yeah, and
there's a lot of overlap.
That's what I feel like anxiety and depression are. Is I think they're those. It's literally your brain attacking itself.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Okay, so not punch me in the face.
No,
I mean we can do that just for laughs and giggles. You redeemed yourself.
I did.
Yeah, I was thinking about
by moving to lupus, that made it so much better.
Well, I just couldn't quite understand what the metaphor was at first.
Yeah.
But yeah, the lupus one. Yeah. Last time you were talking about diagnosis and finding out what's wrong.
Yeah.
And, I think this is a double-edged sword because one of the things I try to tell people, and this is like a balance, like you're not as fucked up as you think you are usually, and it's like, don't make you worse off than you are. And that doesn't mean like that you're victimized. It's just that, telling somebody they have depression or anxiety has to be done in a way so they're not like, oh God, my life's fucked. I have depression now.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot of the time we're just
it needs to be pitched to them like it's a revelation.
Being off, just you had a lot going on, and you guys are talking about being situational, and it's like, well, sometimes people are like, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me, and then I repeat back to them, I'm like, you just told me this, like that's a lot of things to have going on to not feel weight on you, right. And so a lot of the times people think it's like going back to the idea of HIV. It's like, well, shoot, don't catch depression or you're like that you're going to have it the rest of your life and maybe even die from it if you get suicidal. And for some people, it really can be something that's so severe and they drop into it.
Absolutely.
But for a lot of people, it's just, it's really situational. And if you start to tell them they're depressed in a way that becomes what they gravitate to, instead of, wow, you have a lot going on. What are the strategies and the coping skills and what support do you have to help you out of this like rough time? Because anybody could feel that way.
Yeah.
It's just like you have the depression or, and anxiety is something that's like the more stress we have or experiences that we have that can make more triggers and more stress, and anxiety and depression kind of, feed on each other. A lot of energy is put out until we're exhausted. And then we have no energy to do shit, So
and I think that's
what you want to be able to help people identify what's going on. You're like, oh, in the community I work in, using all these words like anxiety and depression, a lot of the time I use stress, overwhelm, that's things people can relate to. And it's like, how do we help you get through all the stress and overwhelm rather than like, oh my gosh, you've got the depression, like pray for you now,
Yeah. Make it sound so.
But at the same time, not making light of it and just being like, oh, it's just a little depression. It's
Yeah. It seems like it has to be like a diagnosis of anxiety disorder or just anxiety or depression. It has to come as kind of a revelation rather than a diagnosis. Like it needs to. You go like, okay, well, I think you've got some depression. Maybe we should look at some meds. Yeah. Maybe you should go see this doctor and maybe you should look at some meds or whatever. And then them going, oh, that's what's wrong. Because they didn't know what was wrong with them until you said that. Sometimes you give the label and it feels good. Like, I had, when I was going through therapy as a kid, I was getting those words, the stress, overwhelmed, all those things. Yeah. And I was like the opposite. I was on the opposite end where all of a sudden I was 18 And when I was 18, somebody finally said to me, "This is anxiety."
Yeah.
And then once it had the label, I got so much better at dealing with it. And I wished back when I was 13, someone would have said anxiety to me. And maybe I would have gotten ahead of it, 5 years ahead of it, you know.
Right. Right.
I think the first
But
time
that's got to be such a slippery slope for you. How do you, I mean, it's like coaching a team probably.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and that's
the
thing. Over time, you start to learn what is going to be helpful to people. You know, like, I think humor can be great with people to help take the edge off of things, but with other people, it's not. Like,
right.
You know, when I first started off, I made a joke, and this woman almost started crying. Like, why did you just make light of like what I'm going through? And I was like, wow, that was like not well played in that moment, you know. But then other people, you know, they're like, oh gosh, so this is just what's going on. Thank God I'm not crazy. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't say you weren't crazy. I just said, you know, having to know that person can hear that in the right way.
Yeah.
You know, where somebody else would be like, oh my God, my doctor just called me crazy.
Yeah. Read the room.
So being able to like, or help people. And that's where I feel like helping people see that anxiety, like for you, like, thank God I understand what's going on. And it's kind of similar, but I have people that come in and they're like, wait, so what's my diagnosis? And again, if it's depending on the person, I might be like, I don't know. Do you want me to figure out something to give? Kind of saying like, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to help you through the stress that you're going through. Or like, if we put a name on it, you know, because sometimes people are like, yeah, I can't do anything. I've got the depression, you know, and it's not even because they're depressed that day. It's because now they think like, oh shit, I have like, I mean, kind of the reason why a lot of people don't want to come to therapy. You know, people come in and they're like, I mean, I don't feel like anything's major is going on. It's just, and all of a sudden they tell me all these things. I'm like, wow, that's like a lot of stuff to have to deal with, you know? And then like, shit, it is, you know, and not approaching it like, man, it sounds like you probably have anxiety from all that stuff, you know, but really just,
no, I mean, I've had, you know, I haven't mentioned it on this podcast before, but I was like, I had a like, I guess sexual assault, like molestation type thing when I was a little kid. I was like before kindergarten age. We lived in Texas. And I, at one point in my preteen years, like my early teenage years, I kind of told myself, like, I just remember watching like an episode, I think it was Oprah, and there was a guy on there talking about having been molested when he was 6 years old, and he's like 30.
Yeah.
And the guy had never done shit with his life, and you know, and that was the reason, you know, he couldn't get past that. And I remember watching that and thinking to myself, well, you know, that guy, obviously looking at him, he wasn't like a competitive type person or a sports type person. And I at least was like a jock, right? So like I watched that and I thought to myself, well, I'm never going to let that beat me. That old man back then is not going to dictate the way I live the rest of my life. Fuck that guy. There is no way I'm not going to achieve what I want to achieve because of that shit, right? And then I'm talking to my therapist. This just was within the last year. And, you know, we were talking about it. We brought it up and we were talking about it. And I said, you know, it's just never really affected me. I was like, I just kind of was like, I just won't let it. I'm not going to let it beat me and whatever. And she goes, well, how often do you think about it? And I was like, well, it pops in my mind daily, probably at least for a second or two. And she goes, well, then, yeah, it bothers you. And then I was just like, oh my God, it does. And we were just like for the next 45 minutes, you know? So, yeah, I mean,
but see, that's even powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Like for you to be able to share that, you know, I mean, going back to the myths for men's health of like, you know, not wanting to be weak or not wanting to sound like not manly or all these different things. And you're talking about like doing ayahuasca and finding these things that are like so scary that you like come unbound. But like, that's the point in a way.
That's a core memory.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can walk with a pebble in your shoe forever, but it's going to fucking keep like aggravating you till you flip out. You might as well stop, get that shit out, and then fucking continue on and like, feel the residual leftovers from that. But like, it's kind of just like agitating in there constantly until you're like, fuck, how is this like impacting me? Because
I think the biggest impact it's having on me, honestly, is kind of like more like a survivor's guilt type thing. So for a long time, like the reason I dealt with it the way I dealt with it was because I knew that other people had it way, way worse.
Yeah.
I would read stories like, like Jonathan Davis, the lead singer at Korn, like that dude literally was getting raped by his parents.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't on that level for me. So I didn't want to have, I felt bad having kind of a woe is me or having it, letting it affect me because, so many people had it worse. And I think that's one of our myths that we're dealing. That's the one that I think is the biggest one we have to tackle as men, to encourage other men to go get therapy and go get help.
Yeah.
Is that somebody's got it worse than me.
Yeah.
Somebody's always got it.
Yeah.
I think that's a toxic thing to say.
I was told that a lot when I would have things going on or whatever. My parents were notorious for that.
And it comes from a good place. It's intended.
It does, because they're trying to, I think, teach you to be a little tougher and to be sympathetic that there are other people that do have it worse than you. But
and humble you somewhat.
Right. But that doesn't mean that my problems aren't important to me.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? That's what I try to tell my kids now is that doesn't, I always preface it by saying, I'm not saying that your feelings aren't valid, because they are, and they're important to you. But, let's put things in perspective as well. And that's how I try to frame it now when I talk to them, but still letting them know that doesn't change the fact that it's important to you and we still need to talk about it and so on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, you're talking about like your teenager, they break up and you're like, yeah, I mean, we knew that wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
But it's also an opportunity to help kids at that point, like talk about feelings and even let them know it's okay, because even there you're like, yeah, that girl sucks. I'm glad you guys broke up. But
yeah.
If they get to talk about their feelings that are going to be just like another adult male has, or, not that they're adults, but and help them feel through those things.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that I see, especially with guys, that impacts them is their narrative, like don't be a pussy, or like, oh, I have to be tough, or all this stuff that's like, or like fuck this, or anger for guys is the thing that like disrupts most things. I forget which player it was last night. It was somebody on the Jazz, because Gobert got like punched his teammate. He's out for the playoff. But one of the other ones that was it Cam Bridges? Or no, that's wrong team. Anyway, somebody punched something at halftime, broke his hand, so he's out too. And I'm like,
I saw that video.
Yeah, it's like you can get angry, and we've all felt that way, but it's like when you're angry, then distorts your actions so that you're like breaking your hand when you're a basketball player, and so like helping kids, because a lot of the times, when guys get suicidal or just like really damaging either to other people or themselves, there's this sense that when the anger's there, like everything's fucked, or this is out of control, or like you break up with your girlfriend and you're like, I'm never gonna have somebody, or I'm gonna be alone my whole life. Like these narratives that really create like a heavy impact, and so like as a parent, you can be like, I've been there before, or how does it feel, or knowing kind of like sharing that you've been there too, even if you realize like no wonder my mom hated that girl I dated when I was 15.
Married, right.
But like it gives them a chance to actually be expressive in how they're feeling, and you can kind of show and even help. Kids don't always have the way to bridge into like, how do I have a new perspective on this? And so that's where, as a parent, you can be like, and kind of give them a different way of looking at it, or them even knowing like you had a girlfriend before mom, and like here you have mom and kids.
My parents were human. My parents are human beings.
Yeah.
Right.
That revelation's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But no, and like I actually just had this revelation just now. I think that whole situation gave me a mistrust of adults at a very early age, to where it's probably kind of shaped my. I do have, I guess, somewhat of a problem with authority. I've always had somewhat of a problem with authority because, you know, my parents were always like, you don't talk to an adult this way. This person is an adult. You show them respect. You know, it was that shit. Well, the way all that happened was when we first moved into this apartment complex, I was riding my big wheel, and I'm 5-6 years old. And I remember this plain as day, like it was yesterday. I saw this old man walking out of his apartment down his walkway towards the sidewalk. I'm riding my big wheel up the sidewalk. The next day, the manager of the apartment complex comes to our apartment and says that I ran over his foot. And he came to the office and wants me to apologize. Well, I'm right away going, I didn't run over his foot. He was clear the fuck up there. Like, he wasn't even by me, you know?
Right.
I remembered him. And of course, I'm lying. You know, my mom and this lady, adults, are telling me I have to go to apologize to this guy. And the apartment lady was like, oh, he's great. He gives all the kids candy and blah, blah, blah. So I went and knocked on his door and apologized. He gave me candy. Well, that was my first hit of heroin. And you can guess what happened after that. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think that gave me this, like, this is probably why I could never really hold a day job. Because if I had a boss, there was always going to be a moment where that dude was going to lie or something. Like, that's my trigger. Lying is such a trigger for me. If I catch somebody lying to me who I'm supposed to trust, I lose my shit.
Yeah.
Or even doesn't put any faith in you and doesn't give you credence for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like that I know what
you're
I'm
never
doing.
believed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That probably made me want to be hurt shit, man. I'm a great comic because I got molested. Look at that. Talk about a positive spin.
But do you feel like, I mean, like I was saying before, like that's for you. I mean, we grew up same area, same high school. Like, for you to be able to be on a podcast and be like, this happened to me when I was 5 or 6. Like,
yeah.
Do you feel like going to therapy and seeing, like, being able to just get shit out and just be like, fuck it, at the end of the day, I have to just be myself, all the things, you know? Like,
100%.
Therapy's made that for you to be able to come on here and just say what you did? Because
I think so, absolutely, but not my. I would say not even my recent therapy though. Just my life of, just lifelong. Like my mom. One thing my mom did a great job of is I started having all these anxiety problems and stuff when I was in 7th grade. The summer between 7th and 8th grade, I believe, was when I started having these issues. And she got me into therapy really quickly. She took me to my pediatrician first.
Yeah.
And then I finally started, because at that time what happened was I've talked about it on the podcast before. It was when I realized I was going to die someday and there was nothing I could do about it. It was that moment where you're coming to terms with your own mortality. And so I'm like 13 and I was throwing up. I couldn't eat. They thought I had an ulcer. So I finally told them what was going on. And I was just like, I was so afraid of death that I was ready to commit suicide just so I wouldn't have to live in fear of it anymore. But I was too scared to death to commit suicide. So my fucking brain's just going blah, 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 like that. And so my mom took me to our family physician, and he said he's the one that recommended, or no, it was a school counselor. It was Mr. Mathis. Did you go to Harding?
Yeah, I know Harding. Did you? Yeah, Harding.
Yeah. Mr. Mathis recommended this child psychologist, and I started going there. And so that, I think, just that seed being planted, and then all those years, I went to him for a couple of years, and then I went many years without going at all. And then in college, my freshman year of college, I had a big anxiety attack, and that's when when someone gave me the label, and then I started working towards that. I remember sitting there with my friends telling them, like, this is what's going on with me, you know, and, you know, they fucked with me a little bit, but like, I guess I've always kind of been an open book in a lot of ways, but that thing in particular, I hesitate sometimes to bring. I've brought it up before in other situations, but sometimes I hesitate to bring it up because I don't want that woe is me. Like I want to bring it up in a way that encourages people to deal with it themselves and those feelings, because the thing that I remember the most is the shame. That the shame that you feel as a child is really unfair. And so that I have a real, soft spot for kids. When I hear these stories, and I fucking hate Michael Jackson. Now, I used to love Michael Jackson, but I watched that documentary with I can't remember what it was called, Leaving Neverland or something. Those guys are telling the truth. There's no doubt in my fucking mind they're telling the truth. Every word they said was textbook.
I want to jump into an interesting question that I had after we take this break from Brown Dogs Farms, and then I want to ask you guys.
Do I have time to pee during this break?
You have 56 seconds.
Ooh, this is gonna be a close one.
So, all right. Well, why don't you
leave
leave now?
Mission Impossible music.
Why don't you leave now?
All right.
And we'll take a word from them, and then I want to come back and ask about. He talked about getting help from his school counselor, and you guys growing up in a neighborhood that wasn't affluent, and now you working with kids like that. What are the resources going to be available? So let's take this break, and then we'll ask that question. So
okay, yeah.
Brown Dogs Farm are Norwalk, Iowa made hot sauces and dressings. Brown Dogs Farm was born out of the dream to emulate the simple life of Rob's grandparents, who inspired him with their hard work and abundant gardens. Rob and Amanda set out to create a unique blend of fruit and pepper that would satisfy the part of the brain that craves great flavor without sacrificing the spice of the peppers. Sweet, but still packing heat. With combinations like jalapeno green apple, habanero peach, cherry rhubarb reaper, and other great flavor combinations, there is a spice and flavor that is right for any party or get-together. BDF also has homemade versions of their classic and spicy ranch that are one of a kind. You can order all of those and more online at www.browndogsfarm.com and ask your local grocery to stock up.
Okay, and we are back. Be sure to check out Brown Dogs Farms. They're going to be at this year's Bacon Fest. They're going to have a booth at this year's Bacon Fest, which I believe is out there at the state fairgrounds this year. So buy your tickets for them. Go check out Brown Dogs Farms and go check out their website. We are back with Karuna Leary and Bill Blank. Bill, before we took that break, you were talking about how your middle school guidance counselor had kind of recognized that. And I wanted to circle back and ask a question about, you guys were talking about growing up in the same neighborhood and not being obviously in an affluent, well-off neighborhood when you both went to North High School and so on. And with Karuna working in a lower income area, what are the struggles right now, Karuna, with some of those early signs and early detection places like the schools and so on, where they're getting funding cut for that type of stuff? Is it harder? What is that like now?
Well, it depends. I mean, there's different communities that are kind of handling it different ways. And so one of the trends I saw kind of with schools in the last 10, 15 years is being like, this kid has ADHD, trying to get parents to take him to the doctor and get put on, Adderall or Ritalin, which to me is insane. I mean, there are kids that have enough anxiety usually. I mean, that's the other thing. I did a whole conference on like attention problems. And it's like, what is an attention problem? A lot of times it's trauma. A lot of times it's boredom. A lot of the times it's, and other things are going on. So, you have schools that have started to become more aware of mental health. So that's good on one hand, but then they're just like, cool, your kid's too much, like go medicate them. I don't want to do my job. Mm-hmm. And then you have other schools that are more collaborative, where they're like, hey, we have this kid, can you come into the school, or we can send them over to you to like get an evaluation and see what's going on. And so there's more a lot of the times there's more school overlap. I think it's important for the counselor or therapist, whoever it is to make sure it's done in a healthy way, not just I think the biggest thing is like when schools and parents can work together, not like parents just bitching about the school not like taking care of their kid, but then them not doing their part, and then vice versa, like them being like, oh, your kid's
just
terrible.
a blame game because everybody's defensive.
Right. It's like, well, you have my kid for 8 hours today. Like, what did you do with them today? Like, why is this all coming back on me? And so a lot of the times the counselor can be kind of that go-between where they're like, hey, we need to handle this kid has anxiety or he's going through this right now. And then the other thing, like the community I'm in, there, because as mental health became more, there was more awareness around it. People started having programs for like after school programs or like girls empowerment programs to where you're not necessarily saying like, oh, we need to go take care of all this mental health issues with these kids, but giving them things where in that, like with the girls empowerment group, they get to talk about the things, with classmates or boys in their class or parents and teachers that are issues and impacting their overall mental health, but kind of like couching it into after school programs. The community I'm at, we have California, it's Medi-Cal, so it's like low income. It's like the insurance, and so a lot of the times it's free or like a really low copay. And then the other thing too is a lot of the time, we know where our physicians or our doctor, pediatrician, whatever, like who that's going to be. But a lot of times people's insurance will have mental health workers on it. You just have to call them or, ask them to give you a list of who those people are. And so they're not always necessarily just going to say, oh, and by the way, you should go get mental health care as well. But a lot of time, if you just call your insurance, they can tell you or give you a list of who's available.
Under their umbrella, at least.
Under their umbrella. Yeah. And then the other thing, one of the things I think that is huge that I've realized, even when I started, especially when we're talking about men's health, is suicide, and when people are in that space. And what I'd say, it's like, Bill, you like expressing what you went through. It gives other people like, people in the NBA, Kevin Love coming out and DeMar DeRozan and just saying like, hey, I've had these issues or anxiety. It gives other people, guys, especially permission to like, oh yeah, I've had that happen before. But even more than that, if you feel like one of your friends is off or something's wrong, I know when I first started, I hated in an intake to ask somebody if they're suicidal. I was like, that's super like reaching into spaces that like aren't my place to ask about at this point when I don't know the person. But it's really one of the things that can take somebody out of being in that space. And you don't have to be a mental health expert. You don't even have to know what to do. One of the biggest things we can do, especially as a guy to another guy, is just being like, hey man, things have seemed off a bit lately. Like, are you all good? You don't have to be like, do you have depression or you seem all like fucked up? You can just say like, are you all good? And you're giving them permission to be wherever they're at, and then when we also express like, yeah, I've been off lately, or I've had times where I felt overwhelmed, it creates that discussion of more openness between guys and having conversations about mental health without saying like, oh, have you been depressed or anxiety, things that have all this, you can just be like, how are you doing? I'm here if you ever need to talk, and a lot of the time, because when I worked on the crisis team, they're like, here's a phone, people are calling in suicidal. I'm like, man, how can I help somebody I've never seen? On the phone. And I realized when people are in that space, they just need somebody to be
a
no
voice.
No one really wants to kill themselves, like they just get to a point where they feel so cut off from everything. I mean, that's what you guys are talking about when people say, screw it, I'll just kill myself because no one's even going to care. It's such a distorted thought because of course you have family and people that like, it's going to impact people, and so, but that's how down in that place people feel. So like, even as guys, like reaching out to your friends if someone feels off and just being like, hey man, are you okay? Most people are, if they're in that dark of a space, will be like, no, like I fucking need help, even if they would know that like 5 seconds before, So like, if you see your friend, or somebody you care about out there that just seems like off, I think a big prevention or a thing is us just reaching out to that person,
just recognizing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if it's more than you can handle, you're like, okay, wow, it sounds like you should go talk to, a therapist, but still like being that bridge through like that night or something, it's almost like an AA sponsor. Where you're
in a way.
It's like AA sponsors don't always know what the fuck to do. They're just like, but I'm here to help you.
I'm here to make sure you don't drink tonight.
Yeah.
Well, and I think sometimes maybe you don't even know that you're at that rock bottom, because I can remember a time before I met my first wife, and in between the marriages or whatever, there was a time I was at a pretty low point. I was sad, I was depressed, and I just remember a buddy of mine happened to call me, and we talked for probably 2 hours. He ended up coming over. And looking back now, I'm not sure that probably wasn't the best thing that I needed at that particular moment. I didn't necessarily think I was really bad then, but looking back now, I think I probably was.
Yeah, that could have saved your life. Well, it could have saved your life that day.
Could have.
Yeah. That's enough. Like you don't have to think, you don't have to necessarily validate that was the case. Like it's enough that it could have.
Right.
Because it's just I've been struggling to, I've been trying to encourage my son to go. Like, he's 20 years old and he's a professional wrestler and he's an amateur kickboxer. Like he's having real fights, and how does he, when he's dealing with something, how does he, when he's literally in combat sports, and what I keep trying to tell him is, first of all, you don't have to feel, you shouldn't just go when you're in crisis. You should go all the time. But secondly, like, to me, and what I was trying to say, what I told him at one point was, I was like, you don't think of me, you think of me as your dad, like you think of me as a pretty tough guy, right? You don't think of me as a little bitch, like, so
I do.
Like, I was like, yeah, but that's a conversation for a different day, Chris. But so I'm like, I openly tell you, this. I go to therapy once a month, sometimes more. Like, this about me,
right?
So like, I'm like, dude, you got into the ring and got punched in the face and kicked on purpose. Like, you're plenty tough. Nobody's gonna think. Like, to me, the bitch move is not going.
Yeah.
Like, you're being a pussy by not going. You're not being a pussy by going. Right. Going takes bravery. Going takes courage. What you're doing is a lack of courage right now. So, like, I'm hoping that maybe that'll push him along. I mean, we'll see. He's 20, but there's going to be some 20-year-old shit going on in there.
But the other thing is, like, what kid wants to be a punk? Like, no.
Exactly.
Right. Yes.
But then when I see like this basketball player, like, bro, you're getting paid millions of dollars and you just broke your hand because you got so upset. Like, you punked yourself. Like,
because that is more macho. That's much more macho to do that than it is to go get help.
Yeah.
I mean, right. that's the mentality of that right, type of stuff, though.
To me, it's kind of like, it's like if I showed you that I lifted 1,000 pounds, but it was really like balloons. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
If you don't know how to handle your anger, like, part of the reason you work out, like, your son's a wrestler. Mm-hmm. He doesn't just like practice a move once a month and then go try to wrestle. Like, you got to work that shit out so you become better. Right. And our brains are the exact same way. It's not just like, oh, anger. Like, what do I do? Like, punch a wall. Right. Like, you learn. You're like, okay, I'm pissed, but like, telling this police officer to fuck off right now and like
doesn't serve my best purpose.
Right. I might wait until I'm actually in handcuffs and I'm screwed before I say that. But like, being able to decide in moments of what I do with my anger, like, if I get paid millions of dollars and I punch this wall right now, even though I'm mad, if I break my hand, that's like the dumbest, like. So how do we, the same way you would like lift or work out or do things so that you get better at something, do that for our brain. Like you said, it's not just like our mental health is always, it's not just like, now it can be good or bad or like, but it's not like it's not ever there, like, right. Sometimes we might feel like we're not there, but for the most part, like, and so we might as well, like, sometimes I tell teenagers, why are you going to let Timmy punk you? Like, all he wanted you to do is get in trouble so you got suspended, and you did it like a punk ass bitch. Like, like I'm like, go jump Timmy after school when you can't get punked. Like,
that's the North High School. That's the North High School version of some therapy. Right
shit, I know, man. He's like, what are you talking? Shit like that didn't go down at Lincoln. I'm like,
yeah, we were sophisticated over on the South Side.
Yeah. I've been to Southridge.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even get us them all on our side of town. They're like, go to Merle Hay.
Yeah. Park Fair. Our mall is Park Fair.
Totally.
Park Fair.
That was our mall.
Yeah, the
still there.
Hey,
Fairway's going strong, baby. I just got some meat.
Yeah.
It's no, actually, you would be surprised. If you came back, like the neighborhood's kind of going under. It's kind of a renaissance. They're rebuilding a lot of stuff in the business district. There's a coffee shop now. Chuck's is still going strong. Like
Chuck's,
yeah, shit. And the French Way, the old French Way cleaners buildings, you know, with the things the trumpeters or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Like they're turning that into a brewery. Like
sweet.
Yeah, it's getting, you know, it's not, what I like is it's not being, the neighborhood's not being gentrified, but it's getting better.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's not that assertion that like, hey, how do we get more white people in here so this neighborhood's better? It's the people that are here staying.
Just making it better.
Yeah.
Like now, I mean,
reinvesting in their own neighborhood.
Yeah.
Well, when I was a kid, my street was all white people. The whole block was all white people. And now I live 3 blocks away from the house I grew up in. And I've got 2 African families next door and across the street. I have 2 Latino families across the street and on the corner. One of them's got 9 kids running around. It's so awesome to hear the laughter of small children, like on a nice day. And then next door to me, she's just moving out now, but it was a 90-year-old woman. And then my other neighbor, my favorite neighbor, the guy that dresses up to mow the lawn, he's my favorite.
I love
he
that
did the
guy.
whole Frankenfurter Rocky Horror Picture Show, went viral. Like he's a different costume every time he mows the lawn. I had a tree go down in my backyard. He came over in a hockey mask and chopped it up and hauled it off. The best neighbor you'll ever have in your life.
I miss those pictures. Those were great pictures on Facebook. You used to
oh
post
yeah.
them.
I need to post some more. I'll get some more this summer. It's about to be mowing season.
There you go.
He's the best.
Well, we're gonna wrap up here. Karuna, where can people follow you on social media if you're out there or whatever or wherever?
I mean, I mostly just take pictures of nature on my Instagram, but if you want to check it out, it's DRK Leary, like Dr. Karuna Leary. So DRKLEARY or Karuna Leary on Facebook. I actually was thinking about starting to do some kind of like just short informational thoughts on therapy and different things. Some of the stuff I was talking about today, but just really so when I start doing that, I might start just uploading stuff to YouTube. I'll let you know.
There you go.
Put some of that stuff on there.
Well, we would definitely like to have you on more often.
I'm down, man.
Having the professional.
I appreciate what you guys are doing, and mental health. I think, especially guys pushing it more. Because as a therapist, like women probably make up 75% of who comes to therapy.
And let's be honest, we're probably 95% of their problem. So
yeah.
Boom,
I just got a merch idea, Chris. We need to make like shirts, hats, stickers, whatever that just say like "Don't be a bitch, go to therapy."
There you go. We can do that. We can do that.
Then have it say like false starts or whatever.
Look
at us. We're just brainstorming live on the air.
I'm gonna write a note here. Don't be a bitch.
Don't be a bitch, go to therapy.
I'd wear that.
I think that's better than don't be a pussy.
Yeah, we probably
Yeah,
swim
yeah,
over
you
the
don't-
word bitch.
yeah,
Yeah, you don't want to do the whole thing where it's like, don't use the feminine.
or you could just do the don't be a dick, so that way you stay out of the whole massage. Because
Oh yeah,
guys
that's
might even help more.
the misogyny of it all.
there. You go. Awesome. Thank you guys so much, Karuna.
Yeah,
thank you very
guys.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, for coming on, hanging out with us. The comments. If you're listening and you haven't rated or reviewed us on Spotify or Apple, please do that. That helps us. Give us a 5. Otherwise, keep that shit to yourself. We don't need anything less than a 5. So, Bill, you got anything else to say?
That's it, man. I love you all. Thank you, both of you, for coming on. Peace, everybody. Don't be a bitch. Go to therapy.
There you go. Boom.
Right.
We're out. Thanks, guys.